I want you to know that I do have the book. We are not just Africans. I have cited your work in a lot of memos, legal memos, and documents. And I want to say that I am very impressed with your work. I respect what you have done and what you will do in the future. So what I'm going to do is give you the floor as long as you need it. And I'm going to ask the audience to please mute your phones if you do have any background noise. Please be respectful of Dr. Winters. He is a scholar and he is an elder who deserves our respect. And we want him to share his work. And at the end of our show, Dr. Winters, please feel free to share your website and your link so people can buy your books and share them. I just want you to know that the body of work that you shared with us, we could never thank you enough. It is very instrumental in use of the legal work that we need to prove who we are in terms of our identity. And with that, I'm going to yield the floor to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I became interested in anthropology mainly when I was at university. When I went to university, what happened is that I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Growing up on the south side of Chicago, I lived on 47 and Evans. Okay, on Cottage Grove back in the day, there was a Moorish science temple. So when I went there, I saw a lot of stuff. So I had a little bit of Arabic. So I began to become interested in that whole area. Then in the 1960s, my wife and I, we were protesting in the high school. And so then what happened in a sense is that I began to see, because we had history, and we taught Black history back in when I was in high school at DuSable High in Chicago. And so this made me become very interested in our history. I read a book called The Man Who Cried I Am. And in The Man Who Cried I Am, I went there to find out about the so-called plan that whites had to use genocide to get rid of Black people. What I came across was this whole idea of why did Black people in China, why did people in China wear the same hats as West Africans? Oh, what could be found in the Arab archive? And so as a result, that made me become interested in studying our history. Okay, now how did I become interested in the history of foundation of Black American Indians? Well, the way I got into that is that when I was in high school, you know, my mom and grandma always told us that we were Choctaw. But I'm going to be honest, I didn't really care about being a Choctaw at that time because I looked at cowboys who even the Indians always lost, so I didn't want to be a leader. So one day, I did a poll in my high school and at DuSable, and I asked how many people at the school had an Indian background, and I was surprised. Over 75% of the students in my senior class said they had an Indian background. And so I was, this made me very interested, but I never came back to really study. My wife, she died in March, but my wife, her father was Cherokee, and her father's Cherokee, and her father's mother was Blackfoot. Her mother, on the other hand, she had Indian heritage too, but she didn't really know what Indian they were. But her grandma could really speak English, so you know they really would just not pay attention to her because she couldn't speak any English. So this is what led me down my road to become interested in talking about my heritage, my ancestry. Okay, it's very important to remember that we all have an African ancestry. But my heritage is Black Native American. That's where my heritage comes from. Okay, identity theft, the fraud and misuse of the African American identity. Fraud, a person or thing intended to deceive others, typically by unjustifiably claiming or being credited with accomplishments or qualities that they don't deserve. Identity theft happens when someone steals your personal information to commit fraud. What is identity? Identity is the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. Okay, it's very important to understand that in relation to our history as a foundation of Black American Indians. And I use the term Indian because of the fact that when the Europeans first came here, when they went to the Caribbean, they saw these Caribbean. They called them Indian because they were black, you see. And the reason they called them Indian was because they had been trading with people in South India, and they knew that Indian people were black people. So they thought they had to reach India because they found a bunch of black people. Okay, secondly, we know that the Portuguese and Spanish, they knew already about America because of the fact that the Moors were already trading over here. Okay, they teach us our ancestry is African instead of our heritage as foundational black Americans. Africa is our ancestral home, but America is our homeland. Very important to remember. Africa is our ancestral home, but America is our homeland. Because we are the aborigines of the land. Aborigine means the oldest population. The white men stole our identity by ignoring who we said we were and naming us colored people. We're tribalistic. And this political organization, this idea of being a part of a tribal affiliation and a confederation, that's what the white men used to conquer African people in Africa and in America. They used our tribalism against us. You see, they use the fact that we belong to different tribes to be able to separate us and encourage us to become jealous and maybe attack each other. Europeans use our tribalism against us by promising discord among us and transferring our Aboriginal and Native status first to the Mongoloid ethnic group we adopted into our tribes, and later Caucasians as a result of those roads where whites could buy Native ancestry for $5. It's very important to understand. See, when you look at history, every time you read a history book, every time you hear about the Europeans coming in contact with Indians, describe them as being black people. They didn't meet Mongoloid people until much later, mainly when they landed on the coast and they went to Mexico. But in North America, the majority of Indians they met were black, not Mongoloid, you see. To support this fraud, the white supremacists used first anthropology and later genetics to promote the myth that we were just Africans. They never used history because the cursory review of the eyewitness accounts of the first Indians Europeans met in the Caribbean and along the eastern seaboard shows that they were described as black people. The white supremacist academy of status quo loves to lie about the history of black people. European anthropologists originally hypothesized that the first Americans probably came from Melanesia due to cranial metrics. Americans changed the narrative and promoted the idea they came from Siberia. See, this is very important. You have to understand that the North American anthropologists have always been insidious in terms of trying to deny the ancestry of African people here. They've always been trying to deny who foundational black Americans were. Much of what we are taught about American prehistory is based on the idea, I'm white and I say so. What this means is that we are taught lies as facts. And we accept them as facts because a white man said it. To teach lies to white supremacists will not seriously discuss archaeology and cranial metrics. Genetics is a white supremacist tool to erase our ancestral identity. Back during the O.J. Simpson trial, they were able, in a sense, to prove that O.J. Simpson had not committed murder because of the fact that they were able to talk about his genetic profile. Okay, yes, you can find an individual's genetic profile, but in relationship to population genetics, and that's what they use in a sense to study ancient people, is population genetics, it's a whole different matter. Okay, the basic concepts of genetics are that you would find haplogroups. Haplogroups are the populations that represent a particular group. You have the patriline, that's called the Y chromosome, and the patriline, just as it states, is the father's line. Then you have the matriline, and the matriline is based upon mitochondrial DNA, you see, and that's the female line. In reality, blacks have always been in contact with whites. What happened is this. The geneticists said, aha, we came in contact with black people during the Atlantic slave trade. Therefore, since black people were not in contact with white people or Eurasians generally. That means that any haplogroup found among Asians and Europeans or Africans had to be a haplogroup that has always been part of that population. That was a lie. That was a lie. Black people had ruled Spain, France, and all the way up to Germany as the Moors from 711 AD to 1492 AD. That meant that black people had been in contact with Europeans and Asians for 700 years. And this contact was not a contact in which the black people were slaves. They were the rulers in many parts of France, in many parts of Germany, in many parts of Portugal and Spain, you see. So automatically when they began to do research, population genetic research, and they claimed that Asians had this particular haplogroup and Africans had this particular haplogroup, and, Europeans had this particular haplogroup, it was a lie because we had always been in contact, you see. But see, the white man had to do this. He had to play with genetics just like he played with anthropology because he doesn't have a history. We think of Europe as a white continent. Europeans did not begin to come into Europe until really 1000 BC. 1000 BC. Europe was a black continent. America was a black continent. And Africa was a black continent. You see? But to legitimize their existence, they made up this idea that there's these Eurasian genes. There's no such thing as a Eurasian gene. Every haplogroup developed in Africa. And Africans took those haplogroups from Africa to other parts of the world. See, the thing that messes up people is that people think of African people as just one group, you see? But that's false. That's false. African people have evolved or developed at different times, you see? The first people to rule Africa were the Khoisan. These are people, the Sand people in South Africa. After the Sand people came the Pygmy people, the Anu people. These Anu people, they ruled the world, up until the Great Flood, you see? Then after the Anu people came the contemporary black people, real little taller, stuff like that. But there was continuity between these people because they made it, and they grew, and they made it. And see, the whole point is that they try to teach you that everything that came from the white man, get out of here. Black people were first, so black people had straight hair first. You see? Black people, in a sense, they carried the gene to be white for years. It just didn't metastasize, you see? But the whole point is this, is that they use genetics as a means to the light. For example, when you study the DNA of the Anzac boy, his DNA was the haplogroup, the mPDNA M, or what they call D1. D1 is just a name of the African M1. See, what the European does is that he changes the names of genes, haplogroups, so that he can pretend that black people didn't have that gene. It had to be somewhere else. But that's a lie. But the first person in America, 1,000 years ago, the Anzac boy, he carried D1 or M1. The white chromosome he carried was R1. R1, C88. This is a gene that came from Africa. You understand? You see? So that means that if Anzac man carried M1 or D1, if Anzac man carried R1, Y chromosome R1, and it just so happens that foundational black Americans continue to carry M1 and R1, 22%. 22% of Afro-Americans, foundational black Americans, carry the Y chromosome R1. That means, think about it. That means that we are still carrying the ancestral gene of Anzac man, the first human being in America, modern human being. They tell you all this mess about it's related to the Mongoloid Indians. That's a lie. Mongoloid Indians did not get to North America until 4000 BC. And when they came, they mainly migrated down into Mexico, South America, and later they came back up here, you see. Okay, so as you can see, you know, given the fact that these haplogroups carried by foundational Black Americans today are the same haplogroups carried by ancestral man, that means that a lot of us are carrying those genes from our great ancestors. You know, they always tell you that, oh, Black people don't carry any Indian genes. You know, Black people, they only carry the LTA, L. No. ABCD, haplogroup ABCD is none but haplogroup M. But they tell you bullshit. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But they tell you these lies to keep you confused. And if you don't do the original research, you don't know. You just don't know. Why should we identify as foundational Black Americans? One, our original identity when the white man met us was, you Black, we white. But it's also important to call yourself foundational Black Americans because it differentiates from Blacks came from India. You see? Also, it more agrees with who we are. You know, we're foundational Black Americans because this denotes our exceptional existence as the Aboriginal people of the USA. Aborigine means ancient. I didn't say native, did I? I said Aboriginal because we are Aboriginal people. We still carry those genes of our great ancestors, you see? Very important to understand, you see? There's a difference between ancestry and heritage. Our ancestry is African, but our heritage is foundational Black American Indian. And I don't mind saying Indian, you see? FBAs continue to carry R1 and M1. This indicates continuity of FBA population from Paleo-American times, that means 13,000 BC, up to today. The ancestor foundation of Black Americans landed directly on the eastern seaboard, while other ones sailed up the Mississippi River. Foundational Black Americans established farming communities and traded with Blacks in Mexico, Central and South America, and Spain, and directly with Africa. That's why you find cocaine in the Egyptian mummies. That's because foundational Black Americans, Indians, were trading with Africa. You see? When the European came, what he did is that he knocked out all of our trade connections. It's through piracy, through murder, slaughter. In a sense, he destroyed that naval capability of most of the Black Native Americans. But if you remember, even when Cuffy, one of the most famous Black Americans on the East Coast, he had his naval forces were mainly, in a sense, Black Native Americans and some Sub-Saharan Africans. Okay, we know in the sense that the first Mongoloids came to America, and they went down to Mexico. Okay, then sometime later, you see a second migration of Mongoloids back into the United States. You see, you got to remember, Mongoloid Indians were nomadic. They were nomads. Foundational Black American Indians were farmers. And so what happened is that these Mongoloid Indians, they came up here from Mexico. They didn't have nothing. They were mainly ragtag people, basically innocent hunters and gatherers. So Black Native Americans, Black foundational Black Indians, they adopted them into their tribe. You hear what I said? Adopted. They adopted. They adopted these Mongoloid people, and they allowed them, in a sense, to assume our name. Cherokee, Cree, Mohawk, Blackfoot. If you read every history text, whenever Europeans came in contact with foundational Black Native American Indians and Mongoloid Indians, they lived in different villages, but villages that were near each other. You see? But we adopted these Mongoloid people. We taught them how to farm. And what did they do? We'll get to that later. The Mongoloid nomads adopted our tribal name. They specialized in hunting and trapping, and they would usually get their farm products from us. It was black people who introduced the three sisters: corn, squash, and beans. When I was growing up, my father, even though we lived in Chicago, we always would rent some land out in the suburbs, and we would grow what? Corn, squash, and beans. He also liked a lot of peppers. But oh man, we'd go out there and grow that stuff. And every year we'd get the stuff and we can it. Okay, when Europeans arrived in America, after driving out the moors who had in many cases ruled them for almost 1,000 years, you see, they found that the foundation of black American tribes were black. Okay, Europeans hated black people because of the fact that we had been their rulers. You see, they were very barbarous. When the Europeans first arrived in the Americas and even on the East Coast, Europeans, were in search of free labor. Okay, so the first slaves they made were slaves of the black Native Americans. Interesting, isn't it? You see, they made the black foundational black American Indians slaves because we knew how to farm. They especially used to like to take the women and the children, make them slaves, and the men they would usually sell to Barbados. Sell them into the Caribbean, you see. Okay, then later, they had the transatlantic slave trade. When the transatlantic slave trade began, they began, in a sense, to bring over black people from sub-Saharan Africa. And so what happened in this sense is that this trade in Africa began the systematic theft of the foundational black American Indian lands and identity. Okay, the first thing Europeans did is that instead of giving foundational black American Indians for their name and their identity, they just referred to them as colored people. Very important, you see. They labeled the foundational black American Indians colored people. And the reason they did that was for two reasons. First of all, in a sense, they could label them free colors, you see, and then when they took our lands away from us, or they enslaved us, they could say, oh, we put some free colored people in the slavery. But see, at the same time they did this, the white military, while he, in a sense, would enslave black foundational black American Indians, he would also, in a sense, try to have agreements with the Mongoloid Indians. They signed many agreements. Yeah, the white man was an Indian giver. He didn't really, in a sense, fulfill his agreements, but what he did is that he still made agreements with them. And over time, what he did is that he called us, the foundational black American Indians, free colored people, and he called the Mongoloid people Indians. Very important to understand. Okay, because of the fact that foundational black American Indians were labeled free colors, this allowed them, in a sense, to take our land and to pretend that the Mongoloid people were the real civilized tribes. How could they be civilized when they mainly came as nomads and we did all the farming? And we taught them how to farm and we allowed them to live on our land. You see? Over time, in a sense, many black people began to try to avoid slavery by pretending that they were the slaves of the so-called Mongoloid Indians, who were supposed to be our friends. But Mongoloid Indians have never hardly been our friends. They sold us out in the Yamasee War, the Cherokee. They came in and they took a lot of the land. So they've always been real, greedy, you see. But see, the Europeans, because the Mongoloid Indians were close to white, they felt they could manipulate them. Okay, and so if you look at American history, it's very interesting. Throughout American history in the 1800s, you see, there was the interstate slave trade. Through an interstate slave trade, they began to sell many slaves that had been people who had been held in bondage in the North down into the Deep South. Very interesting. Okay, although they were selling all these slaves down south, you find it in New England, in the Middle States. You start seeing all of these increases in free colored communities. And so many people assume, aha, look at all those people being free. No, those free colored communities were not communities of free slaves. They were communities of black, foundational, Native American Indians. But they just called them free colored. So anytime they wanted to take all that, they could take it and say, go to hell, you see? Over time, as some black people did become free, they moved into these free colored communities, which were really black foundational American Indian communities. And then, so in a sense, by the 1870s, they had began, in a sense, to really systematically, in a sense, take away our identity as the foundational people of America. They also, in a sense, what they did is that they had in this Dow Commission or this Dow list, they began, in a sense, to say, if you were dark skinned, you were African. Even though you were in a foundational, black American Indian, and they knew your Indian heritage. These were people in government who knew you. They knew your heritage. They knew your ancestry. They knew everything about you because they lived in your community. So they began to change the records. By changing these records, what they were able to do, in a sense, is they were able, in a sense, to steal our identity and give our identity to the Mongoloid people, and through the Dawes list, they gave our identity to the $5 Indians. This led to most of our foundational Black American identities being maintained by oral tradition rather than identity cards from the government. Very important. The only way we know our heritage as Black Native American Indians does not come from carrying a card, does not come from going to check government records, because they changed a lot of government records. They even changed birth certificates. Africans or Negroes or whatever, anything. Some of us who were really light-skinned, they say you were white, but that's another story. But the most important thing to understand is that they had to, in a sense, try to destroy our identity. But luckily, our parents, our grandparents, they were taught their heritage. They were taught they were Choctaw, Blackfoot, etc. Be quiet. They knew this, so we were able to maintain it. In conclusion, our identity was stolen by whites and Mongoloid Indians to show their jealousy of our culture and civilization and contempt for us as human beings. They know they are recent immigrants to this land, while we were the first settlers of the USA. A reality supported by the cranial metric and continuity of DNA. I repeat, Aztec man carried Y chromosome R1, and all the so-called Indian branches of DNA is nothing but M1, like haplogroup A. So from prehistoric times to contemporary times, foundational Black American Indians have been here. Thank you.
I want you to know that I do have the book. We are not just Africans. I have cited your work in a lot of memos, legal memos, and documents. And I want to say that I am very impressed with your work. I respect what you have done and what you will do in the future. So what I'm going to do is give you the floor as long as you need it. And I'm going to ask the audience to please mute your phones if you do have any background noise. Please be respectful of Dr. Winters. He is a scholar, and he is an elder who deserves our respect, and we want him to share his work. And at the end of our show, Dr. Winters, please feel free to share your website and your link so people can buy your books and share them. I just want you to know that the body of work that you shared with us, we could never thank you enough. It is very instrumental in use of the legal work that we need to prove who we are in terms of our identity. And with that, I'm going to yield the floor to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I became interested in anthropology mainly when I was at our university.